Hello, I'm with the wonderful Clara. She is an artist working out of Pittsburgh, and she makes work primarily about healing. Hello, Clara.
Hi, how are you?
Doing wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Mhm. Glad to be here.
So, tell me a little bit about the art that you make right now.
Sure. So right now, I work in a couple different veins at the same time, but the primary focus of my work right now is I'm working with oil paintings on found textiles stretched over found silk screen frames. So right off, right out of the gate, my work is focusing on sustainability and using what I have around me and sort of um, using that as a way to sort of imbibe it with a bit of magic. But to continue on that, my work is focused on healing what is called the witch wound, which is another term for ancestral trauma brought on through through generations. So it's not necessarily put on the next generation physically or even knowingly, but it's sort of a thing that's almost passed down through your DNA. So if your family line has, if the women in someone's family line, they just don't get any respect, or they're sort of ignored, and those feelings of negativity can be actually passed down spiritually. So, and that's sort of one of my goals as an artist and a witch, is to kind of break that trend in my own line, and in hopes that my artwork also breaks that in other family lines as well.
That's amazing. And how do you identify that you might have ancestral trauma?
And most people do, just because of the nature, or just because of human nature. We've gone through wars, we've gone through famines, we've gone through plagues, kind of like what we're going through now again. But sort of the negative impact that comes from that. So, even if it comes down to like, domestic violence and things like that, it's just passed down that way. And someone might not know necessarily, but they might, maybe a family member, like their mother or father, has always been an incredibly negative person, and they know that they're loved and everything else, but there's just something about them that is inherently negative. And then as they grow up, they inherit that same trait. So it's kind of like the phrase, like, people grow up to be their parents. And it doesn't always have to do with the nurture side of just how you're raised. It can also be nature as well. So it's kind of, I don't know, if it's almost like osmosis. It kind of just goes down the line that way.
That's so fascinating. So, how would you identify whether or not you have ancestral trauma or just normal trauma?
Um, I think that normal trauma, there's definitely more of a direct um, recall. So, for example, like, I have trauma from this lifetime. I grew up in, uh, my parents were wonderful, but just our circumstances weren't always so great. Um, and so I know that I have some trauma responses based on that. And now that I've been working on sort of healing myself and becoming more aware of why I do certain things, and it does link back to those things. But I have other things in my, in my brain meat, as I like to call it, that don't necessarily come from that. Like, for example, I am terrified of fire. I was never burnt as a child. I never, got too close to the fire, anything like that, but I'm terrified of it. Like, even down to putting meat in a pan to cook it. If it flames up, I'm terrified, and I think I'm going to burn the house down. So, and that just in my own work, which in my path, it's called shadow work, where you're kind of working inward, working on your shadow. I'm discovering that possibly in a past life, I might have perished in a fire. Therefore, I'm afraid of it now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Mhm.
How does your art intertwine with um, ancestral trauma and healing?
Okay, so I'm a still life painter, meaning I paint objects. And so what I do is I am healing ancestral trauma through the matrilineal line, so the women in my family. And what I'm doing is a lot of women in my family were homemakers and that, didn't necessarily get the respect they deserved for that. And, or maybe they were, ignored or treated as women were and still are in a lot of instances. And so I'm taking household objects that they would have used or would have been expected to use, and I am painting them in with metallic overlay and abstraction, sort of to paint them as a memory, but to paint them as almost regal. So I'm painting them in a way that they're on this beautiful fabric. They're like a tapestry. So it's sort of paying homage to what they did because no one did that before. And in turn, that helps to heal the ancestral wound so that any children that come after me won't have that burden.
That's beautiful. And are you exclusively working with your own past, or would you work with other people and their wounds?
I definitely would and have worked with other people. Because whenever I'm working with commissions or whatever, they start to tell me stories. Like maybe this is my favorite flower because it was my mom's favorite flower, and my mom was a gardener, but nobody really noticed. And so it's kind of taking those things and bringing them to life. And you can, it doesn't have to be your own family line. Like I could pick a photo of a teacup that someone else sent me, and I can sort of channel that energy of giving it, a platform and putting it on the canvas that way.
So what advice would you give to someone if they're kind of suspecting that they have some ancestral wounds to begin the healing process for them?
Before anything, I would say just meditation and just some breathing exercises. Be patient with yourself and sort of just start forgiving, because some people that once they understand ancestral trauma, they can kind of go back into another trauma response of blaming their ancestors, which is totally common. I've done it too. And so I would say, first forgive them, forgive yourself. It's definitely just a means of kind of easing into that mental space of clarity and calm and just trying to let it go. I mean, it does take time. It doesn't happen like overnight, but I've been working on shadow work for years now, and it still definitely comes up from time to time, like, oh, why am I like this? But it's all in being patient with yourself and doing the work. I also read a lot of books on healing, so that helps too. But yeah, so all of that plus, if you have a creative outlet, dive into that too.
For sure. And I know that you're an amazing resource on this, but are there any like books or resources that you would recommend beyond reaching out to you?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Oh, I have so many books. I just reorganized them all by color because I'm stuck in the house like most other people are. But definitely, and this book was recommended to me by Michelle Gomez, but it is Difficult Mothers, Adult Daughters. And I'll have to get you the author on that because I don't know off the top of my head. But that has been a great book on, and it's not, you can apply it to anything. There are a lot of people out there, myself included, that have a wonderful relationship with their mother, but it's about healing the witch wound, which is also the mother wound, ancestral trauma. Those terms can be interchanged, at least in my knowledge, but it's just talking about how, like, things that happen are just things that happen. You can detach from them in a healthy spiritual way. See what other, I'm looking over at my books right now. I also have books that are, just on incense. I also just have books that are just on spirit communication and meditation and creative visualization. And those aren't related directly, but they're good for, sort of intertwining everything together and kind of helping pull information from different sources to give you that sort of well-rounded healing approach.
That's wonderful. And have you developed any rituals around creating your art and the healing within that? Do you have, like, do you light an incense, and then do you have
Yeah, definitely. So especially around the work. Really anything, if you do it with intention, it can sort of amplify what you're trying to do. So even when it comes down to the very beginning, whenever I'm taking an old silk screen frame that is just going to be thrown away, I take that and I'm giving it new life, sort of filling it with a positive energy. And then I stretch found textile over that. And that's sort of kind of enshrouding it in love and allowing it to grow, that way. And then once I start painting on it, I paint with intention. I cleanse the painting all over with smoke of some kind. And I even use, with some artwork, I will take what's called a gem essence. It's sort of, it's water that might have like a crystal like sitting next to it or in it, depending on the crystal, because some are feldspars and they'll dissolve in water. But taking that crystal essence and giving that extra layer of intent. I'm actually thinking about adhering crystals to paintings in the future. We haven't gotten that far yet, but look at that, you're the first one to know.
I mean, you got to try and then see what happens. Would you say that there's something different for healing a patriarchal wound versus a matriarchal wound? Or is that something that, is there a different process, or is there something different that you would explore?
Honestly, I think it could be the same, because, underneath, the male, female, they, them, underneath our gendered archetype or something like that, we are all just spirits. So I would say, whether the wound is coming from the maternal or paternal line, it's all in grounding yourself and forgiving yourself and others, and just kind of treating it from a soul perspective as opposed to making it gendered, because then that adds another layer to it too. I know that I call it the mother wound, but I think that also comes from all of the reading I do. You don't hear people talk about the father wound as much, which I don't necessarily agree with, because that kind of healing needs to come down those lines as well. I haven't had any commissions yet for healing the father wound, but I would say definitely I would treat it exactly the same way.
So interesting. So tell me a little bit about your history with art. When did you first start making art?
Woo! So I was definitely one of those kids that was making art as soon as they were, allowed to, because I proved that I wouldn't eat it, that kind of thing. But I've been making art forever. One of my earliest memories of making is making a mess. I was sitting in my bed with a cup, with one of those sort of sprue off like child's things of red paint, and I got it all through my bed. And of course it was late at night. My mom thought it was blood. It was a whole thing. But that was one of my earliest memories with painting, was just getting it everywhere. And and which I'm a Virgo, so that doesn't play out well now that I'm an adult. I don't make a mess anymore. But as I got older, it was sort of a thing where, I kept making art because it's what I love to do, but I also kept getting praise for it, kind of like, oh, she's such a good artist, she's so good at making things. So that builds up like an ego, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but so that ego was built up. And then I said, well, I'm going to go to college, but maybe I'll go to art school, but right now I'm not going to go to art school because I've already mastered that, whatever. So I started college for English, actually, and about a year in, I ended up changing my mind and switched over into an art major. And then that's kind of where that ego and really any positivity I had about making my own work kind of fell off, because art school's rough. So then I went through and I got my BFA in studio art, and then I went on and got my MFA in painting after that, because I figured, well, I'm already here, I don't want to teach high school. At that point in time, I wanted to teach at the collegiate level, so I went on to get my MFA. And after that, I got a job as a youth arts coordinator for a nonprofit, and did that for a while. And now I'm a teaching artist for the sort of mothership of that same nonprofit, so like the bigger version of it. So I just sort of I carried through with a genuine interest that I had that, you know, became a passion after the ego was stripped away a bit, and here we are.
So, what was that solidifying moment when you were in college and you said, you know what, art is going to be my career?
It was whenever I was in this class as a college freshman. I started at Penn State, and this professor I had, Mary Valero, she's amazing. She still teaches there. She's fantastic. She just pulled me aside one day because I was taking a drawing class with her just for, you know, something to do and something to fill that fine art requirement, as many liberal arts colleges have. And she said, you know, this, you know, I don't know, I've seen you working, and whenever you're working on things outside of my class, I haven't seen you working on any of your other homework at all. You work on stuff for my class, you're doodling and drawing, you're looking up artists on the internet, you're not interested in what your major is. Why are you even doing that? You're good at this, and it's not just that you're good at it, you're passionate about it. So she really I would say convinced me to change my mind. She went as far as making my portfolio for me to send off to the school, the main campus of Penn State, to get me into the art program, because she saw that what I was doing was just beyond a hobby, in her opinion. So she really helped me kind of change that frame of mind, because I went into college with sort of an anger towards art. I thought that I had gotten to a point where I didn't need to, quote unquote, get any better. I had peaked. I didn't need to go beyond that. And there was also that sort of societal pressure of, well, you know, being an artist is great, but you're never going to make any money. So I just thought, well, maybe if I just go on, I'm an English teacher, I can live like a nice, humble life and I'll be fine. But Mary saw right through that and kind of helped me realize that no, your path is slightly different than the one you're on.
That's beautiful. I'm sorry. I just want to apologize. There's like wild roosters outside my apartment. So
I was gonna ask if there was a chicken in your house.
no, there's like wild roosters that just kind of roam around. I don't know who they belong to, but there's a lot of them. And normally they stop crowing at 10:30 in the morning, but this time they just decided to continue. So
I love it. Like, whose chicken is this?
I don't know. So I live right next. Not to derail at all, but I live right like on the campus, basically, of a chef school, like a chef college. And
Nice.
I have this theory that they like belong to the chefs, and they like use them to make eggs to cook. But like I don't know. There's just wild roosters everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Oh God, I love that.
Yeah, super weird. It's like I have to get into my apartment and like I have to like fight the rooster to get into my building. Right,
Oh God, that's amazing. I live in an apartment, and we have a lot of cats and dogs in the building, but we don't have any chickens. I would kind of love to, like, you know, have to fight some city chickens to get into my house.
we have the biggest thing is we have like an infestation of ducks.
Ah!
We have I think about 100 ducks. So like you
Mhm.
like you'll come home and then they'll just like the entire road will just be filled with 100 ducks. Um, and then you kind of like and like they don't even move, so you gotta like step in between them to get into the. It's very strange.
Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah. uh,
Oh,
my cat sits up on the window and just watches them all day.
oh goodness. Yeah, that's one of my cats is sitting right here, and she's just staring at the rug in front of the kitchen sink. I don't understand what's going on, right?
So I want to ask you a couple more questions about art school.
Sure.
So, what advice would you give to someone who is like going into art school or currently in art school?
I would say be careful, because after being out of school for a while, I'm starting to realize, there's so many things about your art career. Like I know a lot of people, myself included, they go into art school like once they're, in the art part of it, for me at least. They go in there with these big dreams, like I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to be able to get up every morning and go to my studio and make work and sell it and live off of that. But students need to realize they're not going to teach you how to do that. They're not going to teach you how to make money. They might give you a book on professional practices, or you might take a class, but you're going to learn how to write a resume and make your website. You're not going to learn how to do your taxes. You're not going to learn how to make money on your own without relying on grants and fellowships and all of these things. And, of course, that's because college is a part of a capitalist system that just wants you to stay where you are. So definitely, like, be careful, look up on your own how to, if you really want to get that BFA and MFA in my case, definitely look up how to, look up the business side of it and look into healing and just kind of making yourself a well-rounded person that can function this way, because art school is going to strip you of your ability to rely on yourself. And I know that, like, a while ago, that at one point used to be hard for me to say, because I had these great professors and they were such wonderful people that helped me get my artwork to where it is now. But they're a victim of that system too. They thought that, they had to go into education to make any money and have a stable life. So really, it's really similar to what I'm working with ancestral trauma, except it's coming down through the art world, that people are just continuously falling into line in the cycle and just doing things based off of grants, or who's going to pay me, who do I have to rely on to make sure that I can live. So I would just say, to anybody in art school or going to art school, make sure that you're resilient in learning about all of the business things and all of the personal, mental health, all of that stuff, because art school will not take you there.
Do you have any resources that you would recommend with regards to that?
I would say there are plenty of books out there on business plans, and like, I would say, as far as books go for that, because I can always recommend you a book. But definitely I think it's I don't remember her name exactly, but the Mind Your Business workbook. It's a really great book. Actually, I have it. I'm just gonna grab it real quick.
I actually think that I met the writer of that. I saw her give a lecture.
Oh, awesome! I would love to see her. I did see last September, actually, Lisa Congdon came to Pittsburgh, and I saw that, and she had a really great talk with, like, finding your artistic voice, and it was wonderful. But yeah, definitely the Mind Your Business by Ilana Griffo. It's great because it's a workbook, and it really helps break down those barriers in your head of, like, customer experiences, engagements, and making an email list, online communication, all of the stuff that you're not going to learn in art school. And I think a lot of people in the arts community right now, because of Instagram and everything like that, we're able to connect to each other. I think it's actually, I almost feel like we're all coming together as like a collective to reframe all of this so that future generations don't have to go through what we did to get where we are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of it too, I think, is the landscape of what it means to be an artist is very different than what it meant 50 years ago. There's way more artists than there were then. Artists were considered cool when they weren't back then.
Yeah.
How long ago did you graduate?
So I got my BFA in 2012. So, oh gosh, that's 8 years ago now. And I got my MFA in 2016. So that was 4 years ago.
So I have a question that I ask everyone who kind of graduated art school. So the very sad statistic is that 85% of people who graduate with a BFA stop making art within 5 years of graduating.
Oh, wow.
I'm the classic example where I was a sculpture major, and I really have made almost no sculpture in the last several years. I still make art every day, but what advice would you give to someone who is like either a recent grad or just wants to reconnect with their craft or doesn't want to lose track of their practice among the mess of life after art school?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I would say because I graduated, I was a December grad, and then I had 9 months until I started grad school. Which, quick side note, if you're going to go to grad school, first find one that will pay you to be there, and second, take a year off at least, because diving right in is bad news. At least for me it was. But I would say if you're trying to reconnect with your practice, even in that 9 months that I was in between school, after that, I didn't make anything. And a year, actually, so all of 2017, I didn't make anything. I think it's part a trauma response because you just went through this big thing and now you don't have the community to keep supporting you. So you just kind of ball up and don't do anything. But I also think that um, it's a great opportunity to kind of start to understand yourself, and don't beat yourself up about it, because I know that I would sit there and go, you went through 8.5 years of schooling and you're not making anything. This was such a waste. You're a waste. And there is that negativity that comes along with that, like, why am I not making anything? But I think we need to pedal back a bit and think about, well, why am I not making anything? It's a lot of people will say that it's out of laziness. It's not out of laziness. You're tired. You're tired. And even some people, if they don't make art for 20 years, there's something in there that in their brain or in their spirit that's telling them you need to take a break. And I'm sure there are cases where it is a little bit of laziness too. I get lazy every now and then. We're people, it happens. But I would say, to reconnect, I always start with just seeing what other people are doing. And even though I'm not a huge believer in inspiration, I'm definitely more of a believer in get to work and the inspiration will come to you. I think that for somebody that just needs to ease back into their practice, I think that inspiration or even a little bit of jealousy might propel them forward, and then maybe start diving back into your art history books, look at what you made before and see what you can do to improve it now with the knowledge you have. Or maybe try a new medium. I know that after I graduated with my MFA in painting, I wandered around for a while and I just drew or sketched, or I would switch painting mediums because I was just a staunch oil painter in grad school. I didn't do anything else. But then I started experimenting with watercolor in early 2018 after the year of not making anything. And that was kind of my segue back into making art because I was trying something completely different.
That's so smart. Yeah. And would you say that maybe working on smaller things is a little bit easier or?
Oh, for sure. Because, we don't have the studios we had when we were in school. If there's one thing that art school gives you, it is a place to work. So my studio right now is the small second bedroom in our apartment, and it's nice. It's actually really similar to the size that my studio was in grad school, but I definitely eased back into making work by making small things because it does have a lot to do with your community, because I didn't have the community saying, yo, you should do that, but 5 feet wide. Now just to get myself back into it, it's like, oh, I'm just going to go on a 4x4 inch piece of paper and do a painting there first. And then you finish it really fast because it's so small. And that gives you that little confidence boost. Oh, I finished something today. I'm going to do this again tomorrow. So it's definitely those very small steps, with, not quite instant gratification, but definitely rewarding yourself every time you finish one. So that, I guess oh God, I don't know. That's probably not. Yeah, no, it's a positive thing. You're chasing a positive feeling.
This is a bit of a selfish question, but do you make art in your bed?
No.
Really?
So that's a half lie. I make digital art in my bed. So I'm talking to you on my iPad right now, but I have Art Rage and Procreate, so I'll play around with that in my bed. But I don't take any actual artist materials like pencil, paper, paint. I don't do that in my bed at all. And I think it's just because I've never thought about it. since, you know, spilling paint in my bed as a kid. Oh, wow, look at that. That's why I don't paint in my bed.
The trauma.
Yeah.
Well, so I asked that because when I was in art school, we had a class where it was about like knowing yourself, and we had all
Mhm.
3D kids, like 90 kids, all in one room. And the teacher asked, "Who here makes art in their bed?" And every single person raised their hand. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, and I've been doing these interviews, and I always ask people, and every person who I ask, everyone makes art in their bed, and no one ever talks about it. And I just,
Oh my God. I'm writing this down because it's just not really something I thought about.
I have actually a series on, not to like do a shameless plug here, but I have a series on this YouTube channel that this is posted on called
Mhm.
Infinite Studios, where I'm doing the recordings all from my bed specifically to explore that as a studio space. But anyway, it's something that I ask everyone. It's a totally shame.
Oh
To-
no, I think that that's a really cool thing to explore. My a friend of mine who's also my studio mate at work, a lot of her work is based on availabilism, and she's a performance artist. So I think that that's actually something I will recommend your work to her, because she's looking at, you know, what can you make art from your environment, like around you, and maybe your environment as art is something that can play into that as well. So I think that that's super cool.
Thank you. So you're working a lot with found materials. Can you tell me a little bit about like what it means to have find a material, and then also, how do you mix found materials and stuff that you bought at the craft store, and like what is that negotiation like?
Yeah, so I'll answer that in order. But so whenever I use the found materials, this started because the objects that I paint are found objects. So they're either it's, you know, an old teapot that I found a picture of. I've definitely been that person where I found like a teapot that I like and I love it, but I want to make sure I'm allowed to paint it. So I'll message the person on eBay like, hey, can I use this picture to paint this? And usually they're like, yeah, I don't care. But so I find these objects that I have like a connection to, and they're always older things. And I used to paint used tea bags, so that kind of gave them a second life. Um, but I was always painting on, you know, brand new canvases. I don't like to stretch my canvases because, you know, if it's already out there, why do I have to do it twice? So I would always just, and I used to work at Michael's, so I would get a hefty discount on those gallery wrapped canvases. So I would just, you know, paint these old things on new canvases, and it just felt like there was a real disconnect there. It's like, why am I going out and hurting the environment more by buying this thing wrapped in plastic so that I can bring it home, throw all the plastic away, and paint something old on it? Which I know that's what the majority of people that paint older things do, and that's, you know, fine for whoever wants to do it that isn't like me and is going to overthink it. So I started thinking about, well, what can I paint on? And I was at work, and we have access to some materials there, and our studio at work is just this huge. It's almost like a warehouse room that's just full of cool stuff. And so I thought, well, I'm going to try to paint on this little piece of fabric and see how that works. So I painted a cup on a piece of fabric, and I really liked seeing the mix of painting an old object on older fabric, because then there's that element of nostalgia. Like, I did a painting recently. I sent them both to you, but they're of a tea kettle and a cup on this blue floral fabric. And I picked this fabric because it reminded me so much of the curtains that were in my grandma's house when I was a kid, that that connection kind of helped marry itself to the object I was painting and gave it meaning. So now I'm able to sort of take these fabrics and kind of attach an emotion to it and allow that to bring the painting even further into what I want it to be. And what was the second? Oh yeah, the second part of your question was so I do occasionally, I will use newer materials with the old um, for different sizing purposes. For example, like I couldn't find a little 8x8, you know, pre-stretched silkscreen frame. And I mean, you could use a picture frame too, as long as it's secure and you can secure it so it doesn't warp. But so for the smaller paintings, I actually stretch the fabric over a panel, and that kind of gives like a nice rigid surface, but also is still the fabric. So every now and then I do marry the two, depending on what my needs are for sizing, or if, I want to paint on something round or something like that. I haven't painted just right on a brand new surface in close to a year. I was thinking about it last night, actually. I was like, I haven't painted on canvas in a long time. I kind of miss it. But at the same time, I feel like I'm helping the earth a little bit by not always going out and buying something new.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And that's such a good motivation. And that's, I think that line of thinking is so important, so powerful. I have another selfish question for you.
Sure.
So, I own an art documentation company, so I'm super curious always about how artists document their work. And, for you, you're really passionate, not just about the final image, but the process. Like you're making process paintings in a way.
Mm-hmm.
How do you portray the process when documenting and sharing your work?
So with I really like to share my process by, first of all, I don't paint the entire surface. I purposely leave different portions of the process visible the whole way through, whether that's a little bit of the background color coming through or the fabric that you can still see all the way around it. I like to leave that bit of the process because, I'm paying homage to these people that came before me, but we're all multifaceted beings in different stages of development all the time. So that's kind of how that ties in for that. In my paintings before, when I was working on canvas and panel, like exclusively with no fabric, I would gesso it first and do all of that traditional work, but I would leave parts of that sticking out, or I would sand it down. I love leaving parts of my process because it shows development, much like, people show development.
That's beautiful. And do you write about your work, or how do you?
So I like to, I have like many artists, I have like an artist statement and that kind of thing. I do a lot of journaling for myself. I don't necessarily always journal about my work. I do have a notebook sitting next to my studio, like next to my easel at all times, that I can jot down like color mixtures or any thoughts I have. But most of my writing actually kind of goes into my social media posting. I tell stories about the work in the post so that people have more of a connection to them when they're viewing it for the first time on their feeds.
That's a good question to get into next.
Mm-hmm.
But with social media, is there a way that this is something that I'm struggling with, is there a way that you can archive that? Because the thing is, like, social media is so instant, it's so now, but
Right.
It's like something like Instagram it doesn't really work well for things that happened 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way? Yeah.
I had never thought about documenting it, honestly. That's really smart. Because I have, like most, people, occasionally I will go through and go, well, that picture doesn't mean anything to me anymore, and I'll delete it. And then, of course, there might have been a really good story with that, but in my, ego-driven need to delete things, I let go of it, which I've actually stopped doing on purpose. But I'm looking at my Instagram feed right now, and there are definitely ways that I could archive this for sure. But yeah, that is really smart. I never considered, archiving it beyond just leaving it on an Instagram page that could disappear at any moment.
Yeah. Do you?
Life is
Yeah, I think about, I had that problem. So I own a publishing company, and we had Facebook, like our entire audience was on Facebook, but then back in 2018, I deleted my personal Facebook because I just wasn't interested anymore. Deleted the page. Like when I deleted mine, I deleted that page and everything's gone.
Oh!
I've got a couple thousand followers, which for like a book club was a big audience, but tell me a little bit about why you post to social media and what strategies you have to do that.
Sure. So I genuinely really love the connection that people can gain from social media. I know that I have, even in my own friend circle, people have really mixed feelings about it, whether it's an invasion of privacy or it feels like work or any of those sorts of things. And I've always just felt like it's just a beautiful way to connect people. There's an artist that we actually had over at my job recently as a visiting artist that he works a lot with social media. His name is Adam Chow. I can send you his Instagram. His work is amazing. He's a ceramicist, and he works a lot with the connection that you can gain from social media because he and his husband were long distance for a long time, and social media and interacting, on one of these was what, he attributes his marriage to that. So I think that I would almost say almost a general consensus of a lot of society is that social media and phones and everything just tear us apart and make us super just focused on ourselves and all of these things. But I would disagree with that. I think that social media is beautiful because, had it not been for Instagram, I wouldn't know who you are. I wouldn't know who any of the artists that I connect with on a daily basis were. I think that it's a beautiful way to find your community. And I use it as, looking at my page now, I use it as not only a feed to share my artwork with everyone, but I also use it to talk with people and to sort of promote that idea of healing ourselves, and just through making art and through introspection and everything like that. I think that it's a really great way for us to share who we are beyond what we make. And I don't know, I think that that's just a really, really, especially like with things, when things happen in the world, like with what's going on right now with the coronavirus, we're still connected. Whereas, if you look back to like the influenza pandemic, they were, they were shut in their houses. They were shut in their houses with no connection to anything. And I think that, and definitely I don't want to minimize anybody that's having a really hard time right now, because I think that it is still very difficult, and I've had some difficulty with everything going on right now. But I think that if we find ways to connect, even if it is through our phone, through our computers, I think it's really helped me, and I think it can help a lot of other people too, if they're willing to see social media as just a means to connect with people.
That's beautiful.
Thanks.
What strategies do you use to reach people through social media?
So I would say the main thing that I do is storytelling. So with the majority of everything I post, there's a story associated with it. For example, let me look. It's also great as a reference because I can just open it up and answer a question. Like, for example, I painted a sage bundle recently. And for anyone that doesn't know, a sage bundle is just dried sage leaves kind of bound with cording or anything. And you can, burn that to spiritually cleanse your space. But let's see. Like, one thing I said on here was, I start telling my audience about how what's great about making painting is that I get to share my work with everyone while simultaneously healing myself. And then I talk about that a little more, and then I talk about the properties of sage and all of those things. And that might help educate someone else, but even that post is kind of healing me as well, because I'm able to talk about it openly. So it's almost like, in a way, it's, for me at least, it's like an open-ended therapy. So I'm able to connect that way, and maybe that will help somebody else to open up about what they're going through in their own posts.
That's really nice. Would you say, are you an artist that's interested in selling your work?
Definitely, I do sell my work. I like anything. I know that I know a lot of artists that they make work constantly, but they don't sell it because they're either afraid to ask for money for their work, or they are just so attached to it. Where I am really attached to everything I make, I also, from a sales and business perspective, I am able to look at it as a product to sell. So yeah, I do sell my work relatively regularly. And I have a couple collectors that kind of come back, which is really nice. but yeah, so I do sell my work, and all of that good stuff.
Is it, um, is there any, I want to ask this in like the nicest way possible, so I'm saying it in like the, but I'm having trouble phrasing it, so I apologize. But your work is so much about healing, um,
Hmm.
and your personal trauma. Is there any conflict for you when it comes to making like super personal work about that serves this function, and then selling that? Is there a harmony that happens? Is there a conflict that happens? Does putting a monetary value on this healing process change it for you?
Oh, not at all. Um, that the healing and all of that, it is for the collector or whoever buys the work, but the healing part is for me. And whenever I'm letting go of the work to someone else, I transfer that healing to them. And that doesn't really change the value for me, because I base, the value of my artwork. It's one part sort of mathematical charge per square inch, but it's another part knowing my worth and knowing my own experience as an artist. So I price based on that. I don't actually add the spiritual factor into my pricing at all, because I'm going to do that either way. And that's not to devalue that. It's just, that's, like if somebody were to say like, well, I paint teacups and that's cheaper than whenever I paint a Fabergé egg because the egg was more expensive. Like, so for me, I don't, yeah, that kind of doesn't factor into it at all.
And would you have any advice for artists that are looking to sell their work?
I would say if you're looking to sell your work, definitely know your worth. Um, don't kind of, whenever someone kind of drops into your DMs and talks about the artwork, don't dive right in and say, oh, well, that one's for sale. This is how much it costs. Because then you are kind of, you're becoming that pushy salesperson that you don't want to be. You can be a salesperson without being pushy. That was actually something I started learning that actually a long time ago, because for like 5 minutes after I graduated from grad school, I thought that, oh, I'm going to pay off all my student loans by selling essential oils. And let me tell you, that did not work. But but and then one of the things I learned was, because so many of the people that sell like things like that, they're very pushy, and not in a promoting healing kind of way. It's very much a, oh, I saw you liked my post, here's how much the oils are, can I have your credit card number? Whereas with selling art, you, or really anything, you need to talk about that person and the product. So you talk, if someone drops in and says, hey, I really like that painting, and you say, oh yeah, well, here's what it's about, and this is what I learned while I was painting it, and they're like, oh my god, well, that's cool, that really, that reminds me of my mom, and then that exchange continues, and then at the end you can go, well, I think this painting is yours, and then you kind of go into the sales part. I think it's all about making the buyer feel comfortable with you, because if they're not comfortable with you and you're like, and it all, for me, it all comes back to healing, because if you're not a healed person and or healing person, I should say, and you're just pushing it on them, or that, even if you're not outwardly showing visible signs of not being healed, people can pick up on that. And I think that, coming from a place of a healing person who is also talking to someone else who's probably a healing person, making that connection for me is usually what drives the sale home.
I I am someone who struggles with trauma around selling their art and monetizing it.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you have for someone like me who makes art all the time, has plenty of art, would like to sell it, but feels not ready or uncomfortable, or like I don't have the skills to do it?
I would say that, I would work on some inner working, because, and I know I know a lot of people that have trouble selling their work for those reasons. Like in here, the work is good, the work is worth money, but then you're like, oh, but nobody wants to pay that much for this, or those kind of feelings creep in. And that comes from just, I would say, not having as much confidence in yourself as a salesperson. I mean, you know the work, you love the work, you want to sell the work, but you just don't think people want to pay for it. And that's something that, like, working with healing, you're able to get past, I think, or you would be able to get past, because there is a buyer out there. And if someone says, you know, oh, well, that's too expensive, I'm not going to pay for that. Then, you know, instead of somebody who, because I used to be the person that's like, oh, would you take this for it? You know, devaluing the artwork. Whereas now, if someone's like, oh, I can't pay for that, I will offer, either, depending on the person, I might offer a payment plan, or I will just understand that it's just feedback and I need to move forward because that artwork is meant for someone else.
That's beautiful. I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk a little bit about the situation that's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of artists, self included, are totally displaced. The whole art world's kind of on halt and shut down.
Yeah.
Crazy. What are you doing to kind of make lemonade here?
Mm-hmm.
And then any advice that you would have to other artists?
So one thing I will mention, and I am really grateful and blessed at the moment to have a full-time job that I can actually work from home. I am in a bit of a different place than some other artists, because I know a lot of artists that are displaced right now, or furloughed, or, you know, laid off entirely. And I, so I'm very grateful that I still have, you know, 9 to 5 employment right now, because that allows me time to kind of reflect on everything that's going on, donate to anybody that, you know, is like because Pittsburgh has a few organizations right now that are helping artists specifically. So I'm able to kind of give a little money to that. And sort of, so because of that, I'm able to ease into a mindset of abundance a bit easier. But I think that one thing I've learned along the way, just being surrounded by so many great artists and coaches and everything, is that for anybody that is worried right now about like financial things, money is not positive or negative, it just is. And I think if we are able to kind of remain confident in ourselves, in our business as artists, that will really help push your business forward even right now. Because there are people out there right now who are staring at their walls going, you know, I could use something from that person. I'm really bored. So, you know, not to say, you know, don't, you know, we're not taking advantage of people that are bored and just want to buy stuff because they're home, but we're still providing a service. And that service, you know, might be healing through artwork. It might be, you know, making utilitarian things like cups and things like that. I think that much like the Renaissance, I think that this might be a really great time for artists. Obviously, you know, don't switch your mindset overnight and be like, all right, I'm going to sell 30 paintings this week because that girl on that podcast or YouTube video said I need to just switch my mindset and do it. I think it takes reflecting within and working on yourself. This is a great time to do that because a lot of us are stuck at home. You know, a lot of us, I think you and I both are living in states where there's a stay-at-home order right now. So, you know, we are able to kind of sit in, make work if we want to, and kind of promote that because we have more time to do it. Like, for example, like even I had time to sit down and talk with you today. I'm technically at work right now. That's why I have my phone right here, but I'm able to do a couple things simultaneously because I'm at home. Another thing that I think is really important is for anybody who's really struggling right now and just not having productivity, not having anything, I think it's important for those people to know that that's okay. You know, you don't have to just reject the hustle, just relax and rest, because I think that this is a time for that too. I think that because, you know, most of the people, especially like, you know, us, like millennials, we've never experienced anything like this in our lifetime. There aren't many people that, you know, that have experienced a pandemic on this level, unless they're, you know, 102 years old. But so it's definitely something to navigate with care. I don't think that we need to, like, I I heal and function really well by producing and being productive and not letting myself, sit and stew in it too much. I maintain like a meditation practice that I take care of that with and things like that. But I would say just to kind of take it day by day, don't, you know, don't, how do I want to word that? Oh, don't beat yourself up for buying a planner that you now can't use. Just sort of take it by day, love on yourself, and we are going to get through this. I don't know how long it is, but just from having a spiritual practice and a connection to that sort of thing, I have never once felt like I wasn't going to come out of this better than I was.
That's beautiful.
Thanks.
What would you say is the most underrated or like important tool that you use?
Ooh, like physical, like artist tool, or beyond that?
I'm gonna let you decide.
All right, I'm gonna answer with both. See, the most important like physical tool that I use, honestly, is right now at least, it is metallic oil paint. But highly recommend. I know you said that you're a sculptor by trade, but if you decide to foray into painting at all, Gamblin's metallic oil paint is going to change your life. Because it's actually, it's like an alkyd resin that has metal flake in it, so it's just straight metallic and it's beautiful. I would say beyond that, for me, the most important tool right now is community and meditation. So I've actually been taking a lot of sort of like online Zoom classes that are spirit-based. Like I was lucky enough to win first Instagram giveaway I've won in my life. Was I won a class that's tonight that is like a full moon healing circle. And it's like a 3-hour-long class with 3 different healers, and they mailed me crystals, and it's just this whole thing. And so having that connection to spirituality is really important for me as a tool right now, but also having a community. So like having like, like this interview that we're doing today was really motivational. Even having a staff meeting at 1:00 today is really motivational for me because it's maintaining that sense of community. And the first staff meeting that like I had with my coworkers, and we're all artists, the majority of us are in the same age group, and we actually became friends, which of course doesn't always happen at your 9 to 5, but actually going on and seeing my friends for the first time in this the first staff meeting we had 2 weeks ago, it was emotional because we had been in contact, but I hadn't seen their faces. And so having that connection, like utilizing the technology we have at our fingertips, like if you have access to Zoom, talk to your friends, call your grandma, like do everything you can to maintain a sense of community, because especially like if you live by yourself or you have a roommate or a partner that you aren't connecting well with right now, just maintaining a sense of community so that you have someone to talk to, because that is really, really important right now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see your work progressing in the next year or two?
Ooh, so I think this kind of can attach itself to an earlier question about when we talked about kind of working smaller to ease yourself back into your practice. I've been, I eased myself back into working in 2018. And I think that 2020 and beyond, I think I'm going to start working bigger. So I'm going to be painting similar items, but I'm going to start looking for larger samples of fabric. I'm going to have to get over being lazy about building my own stretchers, because silk screen frames only get so big before they don't fit in your door anymore. But I think that I am going to start looking into working larger and expanding. I even considered, because I have a lot of sewing in my own family line, my mom is actually making masks right now, which is really beautiful. but I think I'm actually going to start doing like the top layer of quilting and stretching that and painting on top of the quilt. So just expanding the knowledge I have about fibers and that sort of thing into it. And I want to, because for the longest time, painting had such a rigid framework, like this is a painting and anything else is not, basically. So I love that, like, even publications like New American Paintings, sometimes they'll show more sculptural objects, but they're still in a painting catalog. So I want to sort of bridge the gap a bit more between fiber arts and painting.
And are there any, I mean, I can't wait to see that work.
Me either.
Well, are there any closing thoughts or questions perhaps that you have for the audience, or things that you want to make sure that you leave them with?
I would say, you know, we're all going through it right now. I'm, you know, at the moment, I'm handling it really well. So definitely don't take that as like the bar for how you should feel. Don't let anybody else influence how you should feel right now. I would also add the same advice that I gave to my students on Instagram Live yesterday. Just breathe, go outside when you can, ground yourself in the grass, drink a lot of water, hydrate, turn off the news, take naps. So just do like those sort of like things to just right now, you know, even if it means not making art, not doing anything productive, just take care of yourself. That's the most important thing you can do right now. And yeah, do that. As for like getting in contact with me, they can contact me via email, my website, Instagram, any of that stuff.
And what is your Instagram handle? What is your website?
You got it. So my website is just claraheizenreiter.com. That's a last name, but so it's just, that is my website. You can get at me on Facebook just by looking me up, Clara Heizenreiter. My email is claraheizenreiter@icloud.com, and my Instagram is my first name, Claira, with a period in between every letter.
And is there a period at the end?
No. So it's just at C.L.A.I.R.A.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been super fun.
All right.